as we initiate chaos. Theory guarantees that we'll play like lightning shots, sounding like thunder. For every time in the face that it hits us, we're faster. Well, they should know by now. They see the world keeps trying to shake us. It only awaits us. The pendulum swings. The pendulum swings. It's in a beautiful darkness. Only another. It's full steam ahead. Full steam ahead. All above the Petty Express. Misdirected from the start. It's a runaway train. I come a freight train. I come a freight train. In a beautiful darkness, the Petty Express. In a beautiful darkness.
Now, y'all, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but it looks like Kim K, her defense is going to be to talk and never stop talking. So again, I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but Kim K started 2 hours ago and she's still not done. Pray for us all. So I have decided to make this tolerable for us a little bit more. So we have, if at any time she shows any point where we could maybe say she's made a point for reasonable doubt, we will take care and we will point it out. For every time she makes a point that we're like, yeah, sure, Jan. And then in a sort of wheel of regrets reverse, we are starting with 50 nerves. Yes, we have 50 nerves on the scoreboard. Will we have any left after the first 10 minutes? I don't know, but it's Kim K, so it doesn't bode well for my sanity. Let me edit this so I can be higher up where this camera is. And unfortunately, we can all see Kim K. So those are the games that we are playing in order to deal with the terror and horror and torment that is the fact that this woman seems to think if she just talks long enough, Paul won't have to serve as long in prison, I guess. I don't know. I guess she thinks like if she talks long enough, he'll have time served. Yeah, so buckle in. I have a bunch of gummy nerds. I have slime and I have a fidget spinner. And then if this goes into the afternoon, I am totally having an adult beverage after I pick up my children, because holy God, be with us. I think so. I think after this we might get sainthood. If at any time you are showing signs of stigmata, stop watching. While I enjoy you hanging out with us, I don't want you to become a martyr for this douche. All right, now they don't have closed captions. I do have the sound boosted up, but apparently Law and Crime is buying out Court TV, so yay. Now, in New Jersey and a lot of New England courts, the defense starts first and then the state will end. So rather than hear from the state twice, we will hear from the defense first and then the state. Well, I thought we were going places because the camera was moving, but apparently it was a fake out. It was a court tease, if you will. Or maybe the judge is just as excited to hear Kim K babble as I am. Yeah, JKD Buck. I feel like this might be the only time that Emperor Palpatine's speech, like, yes, let the hatred flow through you, might be, an actual adaptive behavior we should take into account.
For the court is now in session. The Honorable Judge Marco New presiding.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Please be seated. Brought this binder out to just make me look smart. No.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're back on the record. This is State of New Jersey versus Paul Caneiro. It's indictment 19-02-0283. Can I have the appearances of counsel for the record?
Prosecutor Nicole Wallace on behalf of the state.
Good morning, Judge Chris Decker, Assistant Monmouth County Prosecutor for the state.
Monica Master on behalf of Mr. Paul Caneiro, who's present.
Morning. Good morning. All right, good morning. And good morning, Mr. Caneiro.
Law and crime. Could you mic anyone up? Also, not that I'm perusing because I already know I won't be paying attention, but who is the gentleman with the slick back hair and the nice jawline back here? I'm not saying that this side has more attractive people on it, but I'm not saying that. I'm also not praising them just because they seem to be against Paul. You know what? We can ask her in honor of I am not a cat. We can ask if AI will make her a cat. I'm going to at least try to start out like I'm a professional. Whether that will continue, probably not.
All right, we are now ready to start the summations. With that, we go in reverse order. We will start with the defense. Go ahead.
Kind of like a reverse cowgirls kind of thing, because I mean, at least with reverse cowgirl, one of us or a couple of us would be having fun. I mean, fun would be implied. This is going to be torture. Y'all, I am not joking. She is still going. She has been on for 2 hours. Oh, it never has, ever. MLS. It never has. Can you imagine me with an HR department in any vicinity?
Just have this table.
Squid, I've already watched ahead, and this woman is on now for 2 hours. I venture to wager that she will not have made a single solitary point. Now, we will be paying attention. If you guys so these are the games we'll be doing for the closing for the defense. These are the categories we are monitoring. Sure, Jan, if she makes a statement that no one in reality would ever agree with, that's a sure, Jan. Now, to be fair, if she makes a point, a good point for reasonable doubt, shout it out. We know. Maybe she did it, miracles happen every day. Now, the final one, and the one that we will start this particular defense and the state with 50 nerves that Mo has left. And as the nerves go down, you will see the likelihood of Samuel L. Jackson Mo. It's an inverse relationship. But basically, I will judge that one myself. And there is the possibility, just like Hogwarts, that she may lose all her points in one action. Now she can re-earn nerve points back, but like Hogwarts and Good Omens, it really depends on whatever the hell mood I'm in. And honestly, I wouldn't rely on my benevolence, Kim K. So those are the rules that we are playing by today. I did not have the mental bandwidth to make ways I could say, shut the hell up and sit the hell down. Every time I think I've got...
Maybe just a little bit so that PowerPoint shows.
Oh God, not PowerPoint 2.
Morning, ladies and gentlemen.
Morning.
Thank you.
Wow, she didn't even start. So that is our first sure, Jan. That's an achievement. We're starting off so well. Oh my God. Oh my God, no, please, God, no. If you wanted a way to Noriega my ADHD sticky ass out of my house, give me a PowerPoint and a promise of a 3-hour speech by this twat waffle. Damn it. Of all the days to not start and or stop huffing glue. Y'all just want to watch Airplane instead? Honest to God, we might actually have more of a cultural impact. Okay.
The state has the wrong man.
Did she do the dramatic giraffe walk again? I'm gonna have to backanate. Did she do the dramatic I can't walk in heels? Look, the difference between you and me, Kim K, is that I totally accept that I suck out loud at girl, but I can fake it enough that you guys don't realize that I'm wearing a pair of comfy socks. Now, that being said, you did realize that this was going to be filmed, right? And you didn't decide to, if nothing else, if not to work on your legal strategy or anything else relatively important to your client, you couldn't have put a little bit of time into learning how to walk in heels? God knows you didn't, use it to try to come up with any legal strategy or pay attention to the case. Well, it's not June, but you be you, boo.
Paul Caneiro, please. The evidence, the facts, and the lack of information that we have in this case support that conclusion. They support a finding of not guilty in this case. I'm going to spend some time explaining why. As I told you from the beginning, this case is about tunnel vision, it's about confirmation bias, and it's about proving a hypothesis.
Yes, and as I said when you made this asinine statement in your opening, that gravity is a theory, so is evolution, and the fact that I question whether your parents were siblings is not negating that forward evolution has somewhat been proved. Oh God. I yeah. She's already lost 10 points. Dave, you could fix her. I take that back. I think you should be part of her rehabilitation. Dave MLS, the red pill. I would watch that series.
I'm going to ask you to recall the testimony, the testimony of expert witness John Lightbody and expert witness Detective Cordoma, who testified about how precise the scientific method is. They explained to you that when they are trying to ascertain how a fire started, when they're trying to collect a conclusion.
I have never felt more like a dumb person trying to talk down to me than I did when Kamala Harris tried to give a speech. What in the tiny baby Jesus is going on here? How did she pass the bar? How does she wake up in the morning? How does she not? How is she not surprised every morning with that bright, bright thing in the sky?
Conclusion, or establish a conclusion, they engage in a very distinct methodology. And that methodology is not choosing a hypothesis and then taking the steps to prove it. It's actually the opposite. They establish multiple hypotheses and then they take the steps to disprove all of them until
Okay, ma'am, first of all, I can't take you seriously with your jacket, but honestly, no, this is the time where you explain it. You explain to me how Corey was able to murderate 4 people, framulate Paul, all without leaving a stitch, a scotch, a scintilla or scintillica, depending on what lawyer you are, of evidence behind. How? How in the hell, how in the Cato Kalin did this happen? Dear God, we are gonna sit through 3 damn hours of this. All right, you guys, I rarely ever anticipate a jury, in a case such as this coming back, in a comically short amount of time. Now, I've always said that that's what we want. If this bitch wastes their time for 4 hours in a case that has been all but mother effing proved by Polaroid, I change my further estimation. I think it is very, very likely that the jury could go back there, all agree he is guilty on the first little straw poll that they do, and they sit back there for an hour, they get dinner, and then they come back. I rarely ever say that. Now that being said, juries are wild things. So I don't know, but if ever there was a case that the jury might want to, again, if they're all unanimous that Paul is guilty, if there is ever a case where they want to send a message to the defense for all the bullshit that the defense has put them through, this would be the case that I could foresee a 15-minute verdict. And I, after knowing that we are going to sit through another 3 hours of this, no, this is the opening statement. Now, in New Jersey and New England localities, they switch things up a little bit. The defense will start first for closing statements, and then the state will wrap up. But there's not a, state, then defense, then rebuttal. And I think I find that I like this better. I do feel like the rebuttal, I get that the state has the burden, but it does feel a bit like sandbagging. So I do like this. But be aware, if you are just joining us, this heifer is still going in real life, and it's been 3 hours. So, and we've got a PowerPoint. So buckle in, y'all. My nerves are not gonna last.
they're left with 1. And the reason they do that is because oftentimes, or at least sometimes, the evidence isn't clear at first. Sometimes 2 things can be true or potentially true at once. And as a result, experts such as Mr.
All right, you
Lightbody,
guys.
Mr. Detective.
I am putting it to 1.25 because I may enjoy a little bit of masochism, but not that much.
Cordoma.
Oh God.
Speak for you. Sometimes 2 things can be true at once, and you have to take the necessary and the required steps to make sure that you're not being misled by the evidence in front of you, or confused, or perhaps just too focused on one thing and ignoring something else. And these experts.
You mean like when you were trying to say that if you didn't write things down, you didn't have to tell the state about discovery, but you were simply choosing to ignore the other statute in the rules of evidence that if it's digital and you have access to it, you have to share it with the state, kind of like that, like how you ignored stuff, like how you had a chance to subpoena Corey and get his blood possibly, and you didn't. I don't know. Don't tempt me. I feel bad enough that we've skipped most, because normally, as much as I complain, even a terrible defense brings something to the table, but I cannot deal with their weaponized. This is my kryptonite. Weaponized stupidity is my kryptonite.
told you what their methodology was specifically. They go to the location and they start in the exterior and they do a whole observation of the exterior and they look to see if anything's out of place or what's going on. Then they go inside and they start, I think they said like the furthest point away from where potentially
Okay.
could be an origin.
Also, what the hell is this? How in the hell is she? Okay, ma'am, look, I know I'm not like a chick. Like, I get it because I don't understand girl. I really don't. But what is up with this weird cut? Because she's petite. Can, ladies, ma'am, humanity. Can we hold hands? Can we bridge the gap between ultra low rise and up to my nips, high waisted? Could we find a happy medium that maybe, like, for those of us who do worry a bit about the muffin top, it's a little higher, and those that want to show that whale tail, they can do that. Could we find a happy medium? Could we just find a happy medium of whatever we're going to do? Because I'm not a big fashion person, but nothing about this is right.
They go through certain floors and they end up where it appears to be the fire, closest to where the fire started. And they look at all sorts of things and they rule out, is it electric? Is it gas? Is it this? Is it that? And ultimately, when they're able to rule out these other hypotheses, that's how they know that they have arrived at the correct conclusion.
And much like when you find your remote, you no longer keep looking for your remote. When all the evidence points to your witness, you are right. Two things could be true. It could be a conspiracy or he could be guilty. Now, yikes.
And in this case, when it came to the investigation itself, and I don't mean the arson investigation specifically, and I don't mean the ballistics, I mean the investigation. I mean the case itself, and determining who did this. There were no multiple hypotheses. There were no multiple theories. There was nothing ruled out. What they did was exactly what Detective Petrozello told you toward the end of his testimony. They followed the evidence. They followed the evidence that landed on their lap.
Those assholes, they didn't do a good investigation. I mean, well, they followed the evidence, but that evidence was bullshit because it made my client guilty. I have a feeling even with a gummy, she wouldn't make sense.
And they focused on it, and yes, it pointed to Paul. But a failure to look for evidence, a failure to collect evidence, and a failure to preserve certain evidence can, and I submit to you did in this case, ultimately lead to the wrong conclusion. November 20th of 2018. It was 7 years ago, 3 months, and some days. To be exact, it was 2,641 days and 63,480 hours.
Hey, defense attorney, do you want to talk about the fact that Paul's oldest daughter had evidence that she thought was exonerating for her father, and she waited 7 years, 2 months, and like 38 days to tell y'all that she had this exonerating evidence that was supposedly going to get Corey all the guilty? We want to talk about, how is the state supposed to do a full and complete investigation if the family won't cooperate with them? If they've got all these, backstory things that show Corey was guilty, why didn't anyone get over the fact that their feelings were a little hurt with the state and say, hey, I still mad at you for like being mean to me, but I'd like you to get the MFer who did this, and my dad's kind of in jail. Oh God, is she gonna start singing like in Rent? Because we're watching Airplane if she starts singing. I think I would be less confused at Cats.
And I ask that you keep that in mind. I ask that you keep in mind how much time has passed since the beginning of this investigation. Now, I talk to all of you folks first, and then the state gets up and they respond. I don't know what they're going to say. We all sat through the same trial, so I have a pretty good guess.
No, the fuck we did not. If you could put these, I mean, the fact that you didn't use Comic Sans in your PowerPoint, I mean, unironically, I would have. I mean, you have a shit case, ma'am. I understand it, but to go full Chewbacca was something I thought I would only see in South Park. This is riveting, and it's like a train wreck I can't turn away from.
What I think they're going to say, and I'm going to work off of that. I don't know if I'll think of everything that they ultimately submit to you. But I also want to note the reason why I don't know everything that they're going to say to you is because, as the judge will instruct you, a closing argument is just that. It is an argument. And ultimately, the evidence that all of you heard and saw and observed, that's what controls. So when the prosecutor gets up here and tells his story, which I think will go something like this.
His story? Wait a minute. Whoa. We are talking about the use of, let's say, tenuous grasps on reality to craft a narrative that isn't supported by evidence. And that is how you are going to posit the state's case with 13 days of actual testimony, with most of those being experts. Was she born near 3 Mile Island?
Prosecutor will tell you that on November 19th of 2018, Paul Caneiro was in some sort of argument with his brother. His brother, Keith, was upset about money missing from the trust, and you heard the phone calls between Keith and Paul, but you only heard Keith's side. You didn't really hear Paul's side. You heard a little bit of Paul's side because you heard Keith's reaction, and you heard Keith talking to Paul and saying, Paul, wake up, I want to log into this account, get me the login. And the state, I suspect, will tell you that for whatever reason, that prompted Paul Caneiro.
Whatever reason, the $78,000 that was going to be found that he stole. I'm going to play this again because I didn't get copyrighted, but at this point, I am so tempted to go over to Rumble and we'll just watch this instead. Okay.
Like right now, for example, the Haitians need to come to America. But some people are all, what about the strain on our resources? But it's like when I had this garden party for my father's birthday, right? I said RSVP because it was a sit down.
Was this a warning from the past of our future? I was unaware that this was no longer a parody and more a dystopian glance at our future.
Dinner, but people came that did not RSVP, so I was totally bugging. I had to haul ass to the kitchen, redistribute the food, squish in extra place settings, but by the end of the day it was the more the merrier. And so if the government could just get to the kitchen, rearrange some things, we could certainly party with the Haitians. And in conclusion,
and yet again, she made more sense in that 30 seconds of stupid. Oh God, we've got 3 more hours of this shit. Falanos, in this particular case, we're starting with the defense, and she is still going currently. She is, I don't know if she's filibustering, and I rarely say this of a case of import, but I think after the stupid that has just occurred within the first little bit of her argument, if there is no dissension between the jury of Paul's guilt at the end of closing statements, I don't think that we are going to be waiting very long for a verdict. Now, normally I don't say that. Normally I think that jurors, need a time to decompress, and this would be one of those rare cases that I think that we might see a very quick verdict.
To be concerned. And the state told you in their opening argument that Paul Caneiro's finances was a house of cards. And I'm going to address that shortly. They're going to tell you, I suspect, that Paul Caneiro was at some level of financial desperation, where it was a perfect storm, I suppose, between his financial situation that they theorize and the fact that Keith was upset with him that night. They're going to tell you that, I guess, a few hours later, after that phone call in the early morning hours, that Paul Caneiro turned off his surveillance system, and that he did so because he was about to commit these horrendous crimes. They're going to tell you that he left his house and drove to Keith Caneiro's house, and that from point A to point B, even though we don't have surveillance from point A to point B, they're going to submit to you that it was Paul Caneiro driving, and that he arrives at 15 Willowbrook, and the tragedy ensues. And they're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro used a gun and used a knife to kill his family members. And then they're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro went back home and took evidence with him, bloody clothes, put it in his basement, and lit his house on fire. Left the gas can on the front lawn.
Okay, sweetie. Yes, you were watching the same trial. Yes, these are all the facts that they kind of proved. Now, I mean, short of having a dash cam where he live streamed himself and wore a GoPro in a body cam harness, yeah, we don't have those particular, deeply helpful and probably deeply disturbing pieces of evidence. But I think we have him a bit dead to rats.
We're going to tell you things about the gun, that the gun was separated from the barrel. The gun is in the gun safe in his basement. The barrel's in a bag found in the car later. And we're going to tell you that Mr. Caneiro did all of that, I suspect, to make it seem like he himself was also a victim. That it was some elaborate, poor thought out plan that he concocted that night after a phone call with Keith Caneiro. I'm going to tell you. I'm going to tell you why that is simply not true. See, the state is working off of pieces. You heard a lot of testimony from...
Ma'am, I don't know if you're aware of this, but there are a lot of sciences for which we have to kind of extrapolate from very random points of data entire theories. Look at archaeology, look at paleontology, hell, look at astronomy, where a lot of it is theoretical at this point because we just simply don't have the technology to kind of, I don't know, do fusion. But there are plenty of sciences that are based on incomplete knowledge and extrapolation of data using similar reference points on maybe a similar animal that is alive today. Hell, even we extrapolate from media what life was like in the Victorian age. We extrapolate from your outfit that you don't have any gay friends that would tell you better or they hate you. We extrapolate from your tone of voice that, holy God, whoever it put a ring on it must have, well, congenital deafness. I mean, we can extrapolate a lot of things.
Many different witnesses. And not a single one of not a single one of them could tell you that story. The state is piecing together puzzle pieces and trying to create a picture of what happened or what they think happened. But the pieces don't exactly fit. They just don't. There's things that don't make sense. And if you recall the testimony that we heard from approximately 50 witnesses. First, we heard from Holy Basu. She told you about the contract negotiations with Doris Duke. She didn't tell you anything bad about Paul Caneiro. She certainly didn't tell you that Paul Caneiro was responsible for this murder. We heard from Stephen Weinstein and Ron Artegia.
No, the DNA with his niece and nephew on his jeans kind of does that. Oh, God. We are so drinking in the afternoon session. And Mo's a lightweight. I can't, y'all. Damn it. Holy hell. I wish I didn't have to pick up my boys today. This is the one day where I love being a mom, but I wish I had a pinch hitter driver to pick up the boys because, oh my dear Lord.
Who were the accountant and insurance broker for Keith and Paul, the Caneiro brothers. And they just told you some background information about what was going on with the businesses and the accounting and how money flowed within the businesses, the insurance policies that they had. They didn't tell you
I didn't think we'd have to use this early in the stream, but the power of Hank compels you. The power of Hank compels you to move on to a fucking point. I don't have any sage. And Mr. Mo said I couldn't keep the puppet head because it creeps him out unless I start using it. So, yes, the power of Hank should compel something. Oh, God.
Not about Paul? They didn't tell you that Paul murdered his brother? Or his brother's family? In fact, then we heard from Ben Palaucci. And Mr. Palaucci, who took the stand, said he was a friend of Keith's, and he was aware that Keith was a little upset with Paul. I think he said 6 months prior, which is maybe June or so, close to April. And he mentioned it was something about money, which aligns with what happened in April, which we'll talk about. But he also said after that conversation, somewhere between April and June or 6 months prior to November, that everything was fine. Everything was copacetic. He agreed with that. He said that they went out to lunch. He saw them all the time. He would see Keith all the time. And when he saw Keith, sometimes Paul would be there. And everything was normal. Everything was fine. He told you that the day that Keith learned that Keith's house was on fire, the first person he contacted was Paul.
Never did I think I would say this, but I would like to salute this woman because you know what? We all thought that she did the worst open ever, but having been exposed to Kim K, I would like to give this woman a chance because I'd sit through 3 hours of this shit.
Chandler Halderson did not murder his parents. He is not guilty of those crimes.
Just as delusional an argument, just as void of factual evidence shown in trial, and yet a million times more likable and, just blessed in its brevity. God have mercy on us. We're going back in.
And he said, Paul, you got to get to your brother's house. Your brother's house is on fire. And Paul tried to explain to him, I can't, my own house was on fire and I'm at the police station. And Ben is urging Paul to get there. Why? Because Ben knows that Paul is his person. Because Ben knows that if anyone cared that Keith's house was on fire or should be there or would want to be there, it's Paul. He didn't even have Corey's number. The other brother. I'll put that aside for a moment. I want to focus on how close Keith and Paul were. Detective Bassiter testified next. She was the financial detective. We're going to talk about really the heart of her testimony momentarily. But her testimony was simply about finances. And it was more specifically about what she focused on with respect to the finances. It wasn't a full story. We heard from Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington. Those were very interesting witnesses because they told you, and again, we'll talk about this, that they saw two people. Well, let me back up. Heather Kapp said that she heard and saw two people outside of Paul's home at approximately 4.
Dave, if you're still in the chat, am I allowed to sue this bitch for emotional damage? Can we make it a class action? At this point, I think there's 27,000 people or 2,700 people watching on Law and Crime. I feel like between this and mesothelioma, we've got an entire class action. Were you exposed to this attorney? Do you have headaches? Are you losing the will to live? please call the law office of MLS and Mo in the deep end.
30 a.m. She was very precise and specific about the time. And Jonathan Harrington told all of you that he heard two men outside of Paul's home at approximately 4:30. Not precisely, but approximately. And they told you that they didn't know who these men were. But it's very interesting that they both heard / saw the two men at around the same time. And it was a half hour before the fire. Then we heard from Officer Marino, Officer Redmond, and Officer Bernhardt. Those were the first responding officers to Paul's house at 27 Tilton Drive that day. And they just told you what they saw. They told you about the suspicious things that they observed, the gas can on.
So she has been going for a little bit over 40 minutes by now, and I would like to bring up the scoreboard just to remind you guys. So, we are at 21 for the next time we have to do rapper shame. We are, darn, at 0 points, because I will call balls and strikes. So if she does have a reasonable doubt, a good point, I'll bring it up. And, well, our sure Jans are basically at infinity. So there you go.
Lawn, the burn mark on the car, near the gas can, near the garage. They told you about how it was a suspicious scene, and one officer saw a couple of footprints. It was essentially the backdrop to what started the arson investigation. It was clear, the testimony made it clear that it was.
Those government sons of bitches, they saw signs of an arson and they started investigating arson. Those Illuminati Mason sons of bitches. I always knowed they were against us.
Clear to these officers pretty quickly after they arrived on scene that this was an arson. The gas can gave it away. The fact that there was two separate fires on opposite ends of the house gave it away. The burn mark on the car gave it away. And that's what their testimony was about. They couldn't tell you who started the fire. They talked a little bit about their conversations with Mr. Caneiro.
We didn't start the fire, but it was always going since her argument's been flowing. She lit the fire. All my nerves are gone, and this bitch is, well, responsible. Look, I'm not a lyricist on top of my head, but it will come together. Defense the musical on its way.
When they arrived on scene, we'll talk about that. But they did not offer any of you any information as to who started these fires, or more importantly, who committed the crimes. We heard from Chris Sorrentino, the first responder. He was a fireman who happened to live around the corner, and he was there pretty much within minutes. And he just told you he tried to put out the fire. We heard from Fire Marshal Flanagan. We'll talk about him later, but he certainly didn't tell you who started the fire. We heard from Catherine Lachise, who was a 911 caller at Keith's house, 15 Willowbrook. And she basically just told you she saw the smoke, she called 911. She has no idea who started the fire. Detective Brady, he was a detective from Ocean Township at Paul's house that day. He spoke to Paul. Paul cooperated with him in numerous respects. Again, we'll talk about that later. But he didn't tell you who started the fire. He didn't tell you who committed these crimes. He told you about his role in the entire investigation, which was fairly limited to specifically Ocean Township. He really didn't have anything to do with Cold Snap. We heard from Officer Mazzicola, who was the first responding officer at 15 Willowbrook. And he explained that when he first got there, he pulled in the driveway. We saw, I think, his MVR, his motor vehicle reporting. He goes up to the house. He's trying to see what's going on. Told you about his initial observations. Another piece of the puzzle, but nothing directly leading to Paul. We heard from Detective Zerillo. He was the lead detective. He was Detective Brady's counterpart in Cold Snap. And he told you about his role in the Cold Snap investigation and what he contributed to the investigation. He did things.
Now, I want to warn you guys and be the bearer of bad news, but unlike Jen Psaki, she will be circling back. This is her opening kind of synopsis of what she'll be getting more deeply into. We have PowerPoints for each and every witness.
He helped out. He investigated. We heard it. We can't tell you that Paul Caneiro committed this murder. These murders. These crimes. We heard from Boris Wolstein, who was another 911 caller. We're going to talk about him in just a little bit too. But he's a 911 caller. Another piece of the puzzle. We heard from Isel Restrepo, friend of Paul's. She had good things to say about Paul. She said he was a good friend. She said
The more she talks about puzzles, the more I think Jigsaw had a point. Because honestly, you know, if I had to cut my foot off to escape this statement, on balance, it's not a toss-up. Hand me the saw.
she didn't have anything bad to say about him. He was always very helpful. She had a good relationship with him. She certainly didn't tell you how Caneiro is capable of these crimes. We heard from Carmelo, who's a firefighter, who had a very limited role, who fought the fire at 15 Willowbrook, and unfortunately he had to remove Sophia's body. But he doesn't know how Sophia's body got there. He doesn't know who's responsible. We heard from Tyler Badaracco, another firefighter. Mostly about the generator. That's all. We heard from Detective Mahoney and Detective Weisbrot. They talked a lot about surveillance videos, and they discussed what you could see on the surveillance videos, and we're going to talk about that also.
Don't believe those stupid surveillance videos that just show a distinctive Porsche Macan, you know, leaving Paul's house and entering, you know, adjacent of Keith's house. I mean, Spain could be anywhere. The state's going to show you videographic evidence, but honestly, do you believe videos?
The surveillance videos are interesting because they're probative and they're compelling in a way, but they do not show you who committed these crimes. We heard from Detective Corpora, again, the arson investigator. He determined it's an arson. He doesn't determine by who. We heard from Detective Catalona. He processed the scene at Paul's house. And Detective Vogt, who processed the scene at 15 Willowbrook. They collected evidence. They didn't draw any conclusions. We heard from, again, John Lightbody, determined it was an arson at Paul's house. No surprise there. Doesn't tell you who, can't tell you who. We heard from Detective Risi. He did the phone extractions and he read messages to you. That was his primary role in this case. And he gave you some background information about the communications, some communications, a few communications, 3 occasions specifically, April, September, and November, out of an entire year. And you heard testimony that they talked every day, whether by text, by phone, by email, by message, by anything, in person. And you heard text messages between the two.
MLS, can it be considered assault and battery with intent to harm if she's simply trying to overload the stupid centers of the brain and give every single one of the jury and audience a massive migraine? I never thought I would say this, but Daryl Brooks blaming God makes more logical sense, at least to his psychology and sociopathy and different personality characteristics, than in theory, real, actual, factual lawyer making these arguments. Oh God. I do, but I'm gonna need a detox from her. Look, I'm gonna need to wait like a year until I get over this current traumatic trauma of having to listen to her, and then I would be willing to listen again. But we're all going to collective need therapy after this.
Brothers from 3 of those days. We heard from Robert Block, who used to work at Square One with Keith and Paul. He testified about an alert he received about essentially saying the power went out, servers were down. Didn't have anything bad to say about Paul. We heard from Trooper Cocking, who had the canine at 27 Tilton. We'll talk about that in a little bit. Again, a limited role. In fact, I think he made that very clear. He's like, I'm just the dog guy. It's a tool. It's an aid in the investigation. Can't tell you anything more than that.
I mean, except for the very relevant fact that his dog smells dead people. I mean, yeah, he's like, look, I'm just the dog guy. Again, relevant point, of that role being that it's a cadaver dog, and he alerted right to Paul's car and Paul's basement. Oh Lord, this woman is gonna be Baconator for me.
We heard from Detective Petrozello, the lead detective in this case. We're going to talk about him too. He testified about his role in the investigation and things that he did and things that he reviewed. He wasn't there when this happened. There's no eyewitnesses. No one, including the lead detective, can tell you who did this.
She called the dog a tool. She's like, it's a tool. Good Lord. Yes. Yes. Oh, God.
And then we have all of the DNA people. And again, we're going to talk about that too. We have serology. We have Allison Lane, Judith Link, Chris Symposiak, Teresa Nezazon, Christine Schlenker, Danielle Reed. And the interesting thing about DNA, which again we'll talk about, is that it can tell you potentially whether someone's DNA profile is contained or has been deposited in some way on an item, or whether it's more likely, we're talking about likelihood ratios, that the DNA is contained in a mixture versus not contained in a mixture. But every DNA person agreed, every DNA expert, I should say, including our own, explained to you that what DNA does not tell you is the who, what, when, where, or why. DNA can't tell you how the DNA got there. It can't tell you whether there's an innocent explanation or a nefarious explanation. It can't tell you whether it was directly deposited or transferred. It can't tell you if it's contamination. It can't tell you why the DNA is there. It can't tell you the backstory. It's just a fact.
You guys, are we being punked? Are we being punked? What in the hell is this? DNA can't talk to us. If I could talk to the ribosomes, talk to the RNA, talk to the DNA. Jesus, Mary and Joseph, I've started singing musicals. This is going to be bad. We've already leveled that. We have already reached the musical level of Mo disassociation to fight mental pain.
And I know that DNA can be compelling, so we will talk about it. We heard from Michael Abraham. He had a very limited role. It was with respect to the electric 15 Willowbrook. And he assisted with it, in the context of him looking at being an electrical engineer. He assisted Detective Bordoma with determining ultimately that 15 Willowbrook was also an arson. Again, no surprise there. We heard from Christopher Clayton, the ballistics expert. And similar to the arson and the DNA, he told you that certain bullets matched bullets, that certain bullets matched a barrel, and that shell casings matched a receiver.
Okay, In the realm of fairness, and it pains me to do this, but I have principles unlike this woman. She is bringing up the fact that ballistics are in fact bullshit science. So we now have let's see, we are an hour and we are 2 hours in, and we finally have gotten a point for reasonable doubt. You know, honestly, I'm impressed because I didn't think we were gonna get even one.
He can't tell you who shot the gun. He can't tell you who used the gun. He doesn't know. He's examining this information days, weeks later. He can't tell you that Paul Caneiro is responsible for these crimes. Lastly, we heard from the medical examiners. And that testimony was tragic.
I have ma'am, I swear to God, I swear to you, I have been kind. I have tried to hold you are working my last goddamn nerve, and I swear to God, if you wanna bring up anything about what we had to hear on that Wednesday, I would like you to kindly take the only piece of advice I'm going to give you as you are hilariously flaming, you know, from the stratosphere to the surface of the earth. Do not bring up those children. Do not bring up these victims. Because I know, because I've been skimming forward, that you are going to be victim blaming Keith really hard and playing the Paul was a great uncle thing. And I'm going to tell you, now would be a great time to remind you that if you, as Megan always says, have breadstick money and you would like to donate to the curse jar because Mo is probably going to say some things that are going to make Jesus cry. So, in order to pay my donation to the Vatican at the end of my life to get an indulgence for basically everything I've said up until the point of my last breath, you can donate, you know, pennies a day to keep me in purgatory.
It was heart-wrenching. Those medical examiners can only tell you the cause and manner of the death, which we know, which we're not disputing. They can't tell you who killed them. So the state, with all of those pieces, with all of those puzzle pieces, all of those facts, we're going to come up here and tell you a story of what, again, is the theory of what happened. And I just ask that all of you be mindful and keep in mind, what is a fact? What did you actually hear? What did you actually see? What do you actually know as a result of the testimony? Versus what is the argumentative thread that is weaving these pieces together to create a story? What is fact versus what is argument? Now, with that in mind, with the evidence we heard, with what is anticipated the state will argue, and again, I don't know exactly what they're going to say. This is my best guess. These are the reasons to doubt that story. And just remember, we'll talk about this at the end, but it's their burden. They have to prove to you beyond a reasonable doubt, beyond any and all reasonable doubt, that Mr. Caneiro is responsible for these crimes. And I submit to you, ladies and gentlemen, what I'm about to discuss with you is that there are many reasons to doubt. But all you need is one. That's it. The first reason to doubt the state's theory is that Paul loved his family. You heard testimony from Paul's oldest daughter, Katie, that he was closest to his Aunt Jennifer and Uncle Keith, that they weren't extended family, but rather one big family. I asked her, how was he with Jesse and Sophia? And she said, he treated them like he treated me and Marissa, like his own kids. And he would drop everything for us. He'd always be there. He was very supportive. He was just good to have around. And we heard testimony about a special bond between Paul and Jesse, because Paul had two daughters. And Jesse was the only boy in the family. And so it was really exciting for Paul to develop a relationship with Jesse.
Why not have a son with Cuban, friends with condo benefits? She looks like she has burthen hips. Oh, Jesus, Mary and Joseph. Y'all, I rarely be Ivory Lamar. Think of the worst offense you've ever seen, and it was better.
Like the son, it was like his own son, is what you heard. And Katie explains they had a great relationship. They had a lot of things in common, and Jesse loved history. My dad loves history, so they would do a lot of things like that. When Jesse was learning how to swim, he asked my dad, who I tagged along with, and we watched his little race when he learned to swim. And then one time, I think Jesse was in preschool, he was able to bring a special friend to show off to his class, and he invited my dad.
If you hear buzzing behind me, no, I'm not doing that, though I might have a better look on my face if I was doing that. I'm putting on my massager because she is, my last nerve is gone. She won. We're an hour in. Congratulations, ma'am. You've killed my ability to do without my massager. Awesome.
They did things together. When Jesse was bored at home, he would call Paul. And either Jesse would get dropped off and spend time with Paul, or they'd go out together, they'd do things, they'd spend time together. They did a lot together, were her words.
I wonder if this would be very crass, this would be very callow and very surface level cunning, but I wonder if she's trying to elicit a response from Jennifer or the other side of the family, people that loved Keith and Jennifer and Jesse and Sophia. I wonder if she's trying to get a reaction, because I don't know how. I would not have the strength to listen to this. I would have to excuse myself, because I would probably look. I'm not saying that should anything ever happen to, one of my loved ones, that I am going to take up, combat training for agility and to maintain my range of motion. I'm just saying, bailiff, let me get one swing in, allegedly in Minecraft.
We saw some photos. Now, to be clear, you heard Katie explain on her direct testimony that there were many photos taken. That's just a sample. I'm not going to stand in front of you all day with many photos. I think you get the gist. Many photos were taken.
I mean, you get the gist. Like, before he stabbed a knife into them a bunch, he was like the best uncle. Oh, God.
Of the family, of the one big family. Now, who is Paul Caneiro? You heard from people that knew him best.
A massive
You heard from his
cunt.
family members, and you heard from people that were like his family members, family friends that were so close that they considered the Caneiros their family. And you heard that Paul.
It's not my fault that they lack the perception of danger. Again, let's see. My friend is accused of slaughtering his family. Look, maybe I'll stand with my friend, but I'm not going to put myself in the family category, because, kind of like a gazelle going up and trying to be friends with a lion, it doesn't always work well for the fucking gazelle. So I may not put myself in the label of, people that end up dying near Paul, Caneiro. It's almost like being related to, Richard Bronson in a Death Witch movie. I mean, it's just not going to end well. Or Charles Bronson. Damn it, all to hell. Anywho, Death Wish movie. If you're related to the main character, it's not going to end well. Don't.
Was highly intelligent, very smart. He's very well educated. He's very helpful. He's a friendly, kind, caring man.
He likes long watches.
A loving, family-oriented.
A loving family oriented with a side piece of Colombian condo benefits. I do not know who you speak of.
Person, calm, even-tempered, mild manner. And then he never really raised his voice. That he wasn't a yeller. He didn't really yell. Not even at his own kids. Running around being kids.
No, I did not. I need to.
You heard that he tended to take more logical approach to things. And you heard from Dr. Gould and his wife Pam, who were neighbors with them for a really long time. You heard from Stacy Pritchett, who was Paul's wife, best friend since high school, has known Paul since they were 16 years old.
Yeah, the one that looks like Dex or Trinity from Dexter with a wig on. The chick that looks like John Lithgow as Dex or as Trinity from Dexter with a wig on, and then her husband, Rain Man. Yeah, these are people that I look, they set off every little bit of my lizard brain that says these guys are wackos. So I don't know that I'm also okay, I don't know who needs to hear this public service announcement, but a PowerPoint should be a consolidation of all the information that you want to get out. It should not be you writing paragraphs. You should have enough of an understanding of the underlying subject matter, jurisdiction, grounds, uh, to be able to put up little phrases, little things that will stick in the jury's mind. You are asking them to intake an incredible amount of data with very little relevant. You are actively, putting out chafing to obscure the fact that you don't have a point. But if you think the jury isn't going to punish you for this, again, I have never said this before, but I legitimately feel like we could have a 15-minute verdict in this case.
Heard from her husband, Jim. These are people that have known the family forever. And they told you how close Paul and Keith were, that they were exceptionally close. Some people even say they were fused at the hips. They could talk about many different things. They were always joking, laughing. They had a very close, caring relationship. You could just feel that they cared for each other. They spent a lot of time together, obviously working together. But outside of work, they spent a lot of time together as well.
Yes. But did they ever do the ultimate act of brotherhood, which was sisters, dress up in drag and do the sister song from White Christmas? Because I feel like I don't know how to gauge brotherly love. Or did they ever say like, you're my Samwise, I'm your Frodo? Did they ever use the, phraseology, I'll be your Huckleberry? I don't know. Did they ever survive a double dog dare to a quadruple double dog dare? I mean, I don't know.
I think that that's something that I would ask that all of you keep that in mind. Because while the state's theory of motive is sort of surrounding the business, what fails to be appreciated is the bigger picture. Because yes, they're brothers. You heard from Katie, they felt like brothers. They were business partners. They had disagreements. You had the opportunity to hear some of them. That never took away from the family dynamic. That was one aspect of their overall relationship, which was largely personal. Brothers were really close. It was the type of love that Jim Pritchett said if he had a brother, he would want that type of love between him and his brother. That's what he observed. They were close, and it was kind of the Canerio brothers against the world. They were just...
Why is it it's like she's trying to ship them. I feel like she's trying to make like a grinder profile of both of them. These are not sort of the adjectives that you would kind of put in a brother relationship. It's fused at the hip. They were each other's person. It sounds like a very codependent relationship. Okay.
just loyal to one another. They had a very loving relationship. Paul would call Keith his person, his best friend. He was always there for Keith. They were best friends and business partners. And he was very protective of Keith, and he loved him very much. And one of the themes in this case is that Paul had a habit, almost what he felt was like an obligation, it seemed, to always help his brother. His brother wasn't very handy, you heard. If he needed help.
Do what now? I'm confused. He was always helping him lower his tax burden by taking him out of the tax bracket that he's currently in by stealing from him. What in the name of I have this is oh good Lord.
Help with something at the house, Paul would be there. If he needed a light bulb change, if he needed help with the pool, if he needed help with this or that, Paul would run over, he would stop over, and he would always help because Paul was the handy one. He knew how
Change a light bulb, shoot you in the ass. You know, Paul was available for whatever he felt needed to be done around the house.
to do those things. And the state is going to try to use that against Paul to say, well, Paul, he knew Keith's house. He knew the ins and outs. He knew how to work the electric and the gas, and he knew how to do these things at Keith's house. So that's one more reason why they think he's responsible for the murders. One has nothing to do with the other. And I'm going to talk about that later too. The fact that Paul was a loving, helpful brother and would go to his brother's house at the drop of a dime to help him, that just means he's a good brother. That's what that means. And it means that that's the type of relationship that they had. And Keith could rely on Paul. Like he did when he went back to school. Because when Keith went back to school, Keith was busy. He went to Columbia, a nice school. He had to take classes, he had to study, he had to do the things. And so Paul stepped up, and you heard that
He had to do the things. Is she related to Trooper Paul? I have never felt like a speech might be written by someone who would describe education as do the things and stuff. Yes. Yes, I think so. I'm not saying it wouldn't be funny, but have you considered, because here's where I'm going with this. Now I know that the name has been used in political context, but Pocahontas, she paints with all the colors of bullshit. She can hold a thought, but still she can't, well, verbalize it till she can paint with all the colors of bullshit. He's such a great brother. I mean, right up until he stabbed some people, but he was a really good guy until that day he went crazy and went to the top of the watchtower.
he was more involved with the day-to-day with the businesses. But you heard he was very supportive of Keith going back to school. And that Keith would even ask Paul for help with his classes. You heard that from Dr. Gould. It wasn't uncommon that Keith would contact Paul, I guess, about classes, things to do if there was a project, for advice.
What in the name of giblets is going on here? Although I feel like she's mirroring what every one of us want to do. I have never seen a bunch of more bemused people in my entire life. I mean, most of the time you'll see people maybe agreeing, or the people giving this woman the side eye from his own side.
You also heard Detective Migliorisi tell you that there was a conversation between Paul and Keith where Keith is asking Paul to help him with a lab assignment that he wasn't able to do it. He tried multiple times. He was having a problem. He couldn't pass it. And so he asked Paul to log in as him and do the assignment. And Paul did it. Paul was 100% supportive. And what was Paul's relationship with Jesse and Sophia? We heard a little bit before from Katie. Dr. Gould says it's fabulous. By the time Jesse and Sophia were coming around, especially when they were, 8, 12 in that ballpark, it's actually 8 and 11, his children were already in their 20s. They were older. So it was kind of like having kids again. He especially loved Jesse because he had 2 daughters.
At this point, I'm willing to say it'll be a 5-minute verdict. I cannot tell you how incredibly off tone and irritating it is for her to speak of. Let's grant her everything. Let's grant her that Paul is innocent. It is in poor taste to bring them up. Basically, she can talk about Corey. She can't bring any of the location data, anything at all. She can basically talk about the fact that the state didn't go with Corey. It is incredibly strategically poor to bring up the kids and the context of him being a good uncle. I And again, we've seen it done well. We have seen in the Uvalde case where, we came into it thinking this guy's a dirtball and it would take a miracle to get us to like this Adrian guy. But the defense was able to not braggadociously, not in a "I told you so" condescending way, but in a very humble way, show that Adrian was at the scene helping out in whatever way he could. So it wasn't like, well, he's a good person. He's like a super good person with no backing other than friends and other things. We have pictures of Adrian helping kids out. There is a way to do these things, and I've never seen it so poorly done.
daughters, we talked about that. He could just do things with Jesse that he may not have done with his daughters. But he loved them very much. He kind of spoiled them on the holidays. Paul loved those kids like his own, especially with Jesse. He had a close bond. I know they did lunch dates from time to time. You could just see the bond when they were together. They would just connect. Paul loved Keith and Jen and those children. Jim says, I know Paul loved both of them, like having grown-up daughters. Sophia was just another beautiful little girl, and he loved Jesse. He thought that he was Jim thought he was a calming influence on Jesse. And it seemed that there was just a special bond that the two of them had because he was the only little boy in the group. And Stacy said, I can tell you that he loved them very much. I would say Jesse was the son he didn't have. He loved Jesse. He loved Sophia. He absolutely adored those kids.
There are very few times that I criticize the intent of defense attorneys. I normally like to always assume that there is a thirst for justice, at least if not a perspective that I can't fully understand, that there is a desire to see justice done and to hold the state to their burden. I have never been more disgusted. The only time I've ever been this disgusted at a closing was in the Theodore Edgecombe case, where the defense tried to state that the wife didn't love. Oh, well, these are gummy nerds. Yes, I do. And Mr. Mo bought me 2 bags. I am packed and stacked on the emotional support sugar. That was incredibly tone deaf. And I cannot imagine that she thought this was a good idea. I mean, she feels very confident about. You can tell that this is something that she has logicked out to the best of her ability using crayons and Comic Sans, and she truly believes this, which is, I mean, honestly, I want to study the pathology of that. I mean, that's what gets my almonds jogging, if you want to talk about like neuropsych stuff, because the ability to make yourself believe this dumbass narrative is incomprehensible to me.
I know when Jesse was in preschool or kindergarten, he was allowed to bring an adult to school, and he chose his Uncle Paul. And that's how much Jesse loved Paul. And it was absolutely reciprocated. He absolutely loved Jesse. He absolutely loved Sophia. He loved those kids. And that, ladies and gentlemen, that is Uncle Paul. That is Uncle Paul. Now, going a little bit more into the state's evidence, their theory of motive doesn't add up. It literally does not add up. And I told you this in opening, and now I'm going to break it down for you now that we've heard the testimony. So the state told you at the beginning of this case that Paul's financial situation was a house of cards. But what did you actually hear? Now, we heard over a day of testimony from Detective Fasten, and it was a lot of it was a very lengthy breakdown of the financials. Day 2 of her testimony was almost like, here's the data. And then day 2 in the morning on cross-examination was more like, now here are the conclusions.
You mean like a normal trial where the witness first says, especially if they're an investigator, they kind of go through and give you a chain of custody on how we got search warrants, what was the probable cause for looking at different things and all of that. And then they, talk amongst themselves if it's a larger case and maybe ask some more questions. And then based on that, they continue more investigations. Kind of like how every case in the history of ever has worked. So, like, what had happened was, so the witness came on, and first she was telling us how she was experiential and stuff, and then she said, that she was, like, looking at all the finances, and then she took information, like, she cherry picked them. Oh god, she's gonna do this for every. No, Tammy, you've not missed
But I'm
anything.
going to start with
He's
Julie
just
Bassett for a
babbling.
moment. What did you hear from Gooley? That Doris Duke was actively negotiating with Square One at the time of the murders. The murders happened on in the evening of November 19th, going into the early morning hours of November 20th. Only a couple days before.
Everybody hurts. This judge right now, Judge Kent, he's thinking, you know what? I went to school, liked college, decided to go get my Juris Doctorate, become a lawyer. And then I was so good at being a lawyer, I decided I want to try this judge thing. And I felt real proud of myself. I got my robe on today. And as I sit here, I think, my God, I could have been a streamer. This judge is thinking, why? Why did I spend all my life on education?
Before that, Keith sent a proposal to Doris Duke. And a few days before that, on the 13th, about a week before the murders, Keith had a meeting with Gooley and other members from Doris Duke. And you heard from Gooley that they were actively negotiating, that there were certain things that she wanted to change. She wanted 24/7 access. She wanted the costs to come down. And she wanted a more competitive rate. And Keith was working on it, along with Paul. They were working on it together. And Keith sent a proposal, and one of those proposals was a 6-year contract option. It was 4 years with the option to renew an additional 2, which meant that Keith was proposing 2 days, or 3 days technically before the murder, since they happened in the early morning hours. He was proposing that if you accept this contract, Paul and I are going to continue to work with you for the next 6 years. Yes, Keith was applying to jobs. He applied to some jobs with his friend Ben, who worked at Amazon. He was trying to create a backup plan because he was a little worried. Why was Keith worried? You heard it in the messages. He's not on disability. He doesn't have a sure income if things were to ultimately fall through. And Keith you kind of heard he's like a high-strung guy. So he wants a backup plan. He's going to Columbia. He's trying to further his education. He's trying to put himself in the best position, but he also, you heard, lives a nice lifestyle. You saw photos of his home. Ben, his friend, explained to you a little bit about his lifestyle. He had nice cars. You heard he had a nanny named Claudia. Paul had expenses. Keith had expenses. But Paul was on disability. And Keith wasn't. So
Yeah, remind the jury that Paul was scamming on disability.
Keith just wanted to make sure he had a backup plan. What you heard from the witness on the stand is that she only had to renew, or she only had to terminate her contract with Square One after the murders happened. She had to find another vendor. We don't know what would have happened if the murders didn't occur. They could have renewed. You heard from Robert Block, he had no expectation that he was going to lose his job. He assumed he was going to continue working for Square One. There was no indication to one of the main persons who worked in that business, Robert Block, that the business was going to end. The hope that it would continue. And Keith and Paul were actively working on that. Now they had a second business.
It's Bree. Allegedly, he got into a car wreck and he suffers severe back pain and nerve damage. Now, as a person who does actually deal with severe chronic pain, I it pisses me off. It pisses me off. It really does, because he was able to do a lot of things. And all this man had to do was downsize. All Paul had to do was stop leasing cars, stop living above his means, and none of this had to happen.
Pest control business, EcoStar. And again, there was ongoing negotiations for some time about the sale of EcoStar. They got a pretty good offer at some point. And at some point it was $850,000, and then it was $750,000. And you heard testimony that initially Keith wanted to hold off. He was like, let's try to get $1 million. Because Keith believed that was feasible. And initially, waiting could help. But then, as we got closer to the December, when the contract with Doris Duke was subject to termination at that point, we don't know. Again, active negotiations. But Keith was a little bit pushy at this point, and he's like, you know what, maybe we need to just sell. You know, he's stressed. He's looking again for another backup plan just in case. And Paul's telling him.
You mean his option wasn't to go unalive someone, his brother, and hope that he was the beneficiary? Not just his brother, his whole family. So you're saying his option was that he was going to sell one of his businesses, not assassinate an entire family. Interesting.
Hold off. We might still get $1 million. We might still get more money. Relax. I think you heard it in the messages. Paul's like, relax. And regardless of whether they sold it for $1 million or whether they sold it for $750,000 or anything in that ballpark, Paul was a 50% owner. That's the one they owned 50-50. So whatever they sold it for, Paul gets half. That's hundreds of thousands of dollars. And if Paul was desperate for money, he would have just sold it. And he would have just said, yeah, okay, Keith, I agree, let's sell it now. Let's get half of $750,000 or $850 or whatever it was in that ballpark. Paul was not in a rush for money. That's why he was telling Keith to relax and to wait and see if they could get more like they originally planned. He was trying to refocus Keith on that original plan. Now, in addition to the potential income if Doris Duke renewed with the company, square one, and in addition to the potential to gain funds from the sale of EcoStar, Paul is on disability. This was the testimony of Detective Fasten. He was making $232,292 in disability alone. Detective Fasten agreed that was a significant amount of money. It covered his expenses. And here's the interesting thing, because he had 3 different disability insurance policies. You heard Ron Artigas testify. These were like kind of sophisticated insurance guys. They knew a little bit more about insurance than the average person, and they were well informed. So he had an Unum disability policy where he would make $9,490 a month. Then he had a Sun Life disability policy where he earned $7,430 a month. And from Social Security, he earned $2,446 a month. Now, what happened is that payments from one of those insurance policies, they had temporarily stopped from June 2017 to November of 2018. Detective Bassender testified about that. And the reason is because he had received some sort of like lump sum, and it was like an overpayment to compensate for that. The insurance company said.
So he got a relatively normal amount on actually SSI for disability. The problem is, or where he's getting this additional money is he had various disability insurances. So he had multiple insurances that were paying him disability. So not only was he wasn't really reliant on his government disability check as much as other people who might have to use those benefits.
We're gonna pause your payments for a period of time. But once those payments caught up, and once the lack of payments amounted to the original overpayment, starting December 20th, a month after this happened, the next month, a few weeks into the next month, Paul was gonna get that additional money. He was going to get $7,004.
Does she realize she's making him look worse? I mean, her cry that he had all this money, it doesn't negate the motive like she thinks it does. It simply makes him look worse. If he had all of this extraneous money, if he was the brother that was going to, at any rate, continue to have a steady stream of income, him stealing from the brother that was actively facing a different stage in life where he might need that money to live on, to do that, it makes your client look more gross. I don't know. I mean, her and Sarah Boone would probably start a Wade Wilson freaking fan club at this point with how well they read the room. I mean, they're probably the only people that believe that Ruby, Frankie, and Jody, Hildebeest, were railroaded.
$430 each month. He was about to make more money a few weeks before the murder. So we have the income from the disability, potential proceeds from the EcoStar sale, just a lot of money, and the income from Spur wanted Doris Duke to renew the contract.
Doris Duke wasn't going to renew the contract.
Who loved his family. He had no motive. This does not add up to a motive. This does not add up to desperation. This does not add up to
Acting. She is Shatnering the shit out of this.
a sudden change. He goes from being loving and caring and kind and helpful, a wonderful brother, a wonderful uncle, just like that, and he horrendously murders his entire family. Does that make any sense? It doesn't make sense. Not with this math. And Detective Bassender testified that his fixed utilities versus his expenses. And she testified he had high expenses. That's where the issue was from the state's perspective, is that he had a lot of expenses. But those were not fixed expenses. His mortgage was $3,000 a month. $36,600 a year.
Why the hell am I listening to Britney Spears over here explain Cole's cash math to me? Look, as a firm believer in girl math when I want to buy something that Mr. Mo probably wouldn't approve of, and the only time I do that, and it's a very, very small amount, under $100 every time, unless I'm in Hobby Lobby and I wasn't looking at things. But to be fair, that's once in a blue moon. I will not be shouted at by freaking Kourtney Kardashian about mathology. Some bullshit right here.
The vehicle leases were $25,000 if you consider that, almost $26,000 a year if you consider that a fixed expense. He likes the cars. Utilities, maybe a little under $10,000.
You are the reason. Women like you are the reason that Caleb Hammer has a streaming career worth bajillions. Oh my God.
You add up electricity, gas, water, sewer, and then for one of his insurance companies, he had to make, I guess, a yearly payment. I think it was monthly, but amounted to about $5,000 a year to maintain that policy. So we're talking total fixed expenses of $76,973 approximately. Now, the income from disability, if you apply a 39% tax rate, the net is $141,759. If you do the math, it's about $5,000 in disposable income. If you include the Audi lease, you could subtract that. It's about $10,000 a year. You're at $55,000. That's net. And Detective Bassiter, when Mr. Murray questioned her, acknowledged, you can always lower your expenses if you have to. If that was a concern. You can lower your expenses. Paul had that option if push come to shove. Does it make sense? Instead of lowering
No, it came to gunshot and stab wounds and arson.
his expenses, if he needed to, he would instead murder his family. Could have just sold EcoStar. He wanted to hold on. He was not desperate for money. That's not what this is about. That's what they think this is about. Now, the $78,000 from the trust also does not add up. So the state alleges that over the course of 2017 and 2018, Paul took money from the trust. Now, there's the trust itself is a life insurance policy is maintained within that, and there's a TD trust account that's really just it's called a trust account in name, but it's really a checking account.
I would.
That's what Detective Bassiter testified to. And they put money in the TD bank account to then transfer money and make payments to the life insurance policy to maintain that policy.
Yes, that's
Now,
how it
Paul
was
was the
supposed to
trustee.
work.
And the expert, Cardenas, Mr. Cardenas, he explained that Paul, being the trustee didn't require him to make those payments toward the Canada life insurance policy, but he could certainly be designated as that person.
No, being not a goddamn asshole. If you knew the money was supposed to be there and you're supposed to send it, yeah, you shouldn't have to make a contract, but the money was not there to help support Paul with money he felt he was entitled to.
And the state is alleging that Paul, rather than using the money that was funded from the business into the TD trust account to pay the life insurance policy premiums, that instead he was taking money. Now, assuming that is true, Paul was paying it back. You heard testimony.
Look, my client did not steal that money, but if on the off chance he did, he was paying it back, except he paid it back and then stole it back right afterward. Ow. Ow. Why is my... Ow. Oh, good Lord.
That from Stephen Weinstein, that it's a family business. There was money constantly flowing in and out of accounts. He and Paul are paying money into the company, their own personal money. The company is paying money back to them. The company paid money into the trust, and the trust paid money back into the company. There's money flowing all sorts of ways. And Detective Fasten kind of, again, it was a lengthy testimony, and that's essentially.
Y'all, we're going to give the defense another point. He pledged to pay it back. He pledged, and by Our Lady Amber Heard, that counts, right? So 2 points. He pledged to pay it back. Now, if we get the trifecta, if we get the hat trick of his dog stepped on a bee, I will take a shot. After I pick up my boys.
$78,000. It's actually $78,180 is what is alleged. You're left with $58,300. In 2018, Paul paid $27,207 to Square One. Now, remember, in April of 2018, April 11th, that's the email that the state read to you multiple times from Paul to Keith about the $25,045 that was taken from the trust. And Paul says, oops, I misapplied it to something else.
Oops, I did it
And Paul was,
again.
according to Steve Weinstein
I
at that
stole
point,
from the trust. I got lost in the game. Oh, Paul, oops, you stole it again. Keith was figuring it out. Oh my God.
overly upset at everyone. He was annoyed. He was frustrated. He wanted the money to be paid to the life insurance policy, rightfully so. But Paul sends an email and he says, I will pay it back with interest. And he does. Because on April 26th of 2018, he pays $5,000 to Square One, to the business account. And on April 30th of 2018, he pays $10,000
Thank you.
to the Square One account. And on May 15th of 2018, he pays $11,400. And on that same date, he pays another $807. Now he's paying this money to the business account. The business that he owns with Keith being the 90% owner. He's not paying the business because he's a client of the business. He's putting the money into the business account because he's giving Keith access to that money. And Keith can decide, hey, here's the money that I owe to the trust. The business funds the TD Trust account, and the TD Trust account funds the life insurance policy. So Paul has the money, and it's paid back by the next month. And he says, transactions, by putting the money in the account, Keith can have access to that money. Does he want to put it in the TD Trust account so that the payment can be made? Good. But instead, he transfers that money to his personal account, which then goes to an account in Greece because Keith is building a house in Greece. Paul's not building a house in Greece. Paul's providing the money.
Hey, y'all, I forget, but is this the case where Keith is on trial for anything? I don't remember. I think I remember that Keith was actually a victim. I don't know.
That was taken from the trust account. It's paying it back with interest. And Keith decides, instead of putting that money toward the Canada life insurance policy, he's going to use it to pay for his house in Greece. That was Keith's choice. But Paul paid it back. And it was not unusual for this to occur. Because in prior years, according to Ron Artigas, the trust was often underfunded. This resulted in a loan against the Canada life insurance policy. As early as 2007, over 10 years prior, the loan against the policy was $45,000. Now, what does this mean? Well, in order to maintain the Canada life insurance policy, Keith had to have those payments made, the premium payments. It was like $7,000 a quarter and some change. Now, if the premium doesn't get paid, it's not the case that the insurance policy gets canceled. Instead, the insurance policy takes a loan out against the ultimate amount of money. So the loan in 2007 was $45,000, which means if the policy was ultimately cashed out, it would be the $45,000 would be subtracted from the cash value. That's what that means. But what it also means is that as early as 2007, payments weren't being made toward this life insurance policy. This was not unusual because, again, as Steve Weinstein testified, the money was flowing all around to different accounts, and the brothers decided what their priority was at the time. Sometimes it was funding the business. Sometimes it was being able to meet payroll for their employees. Sometimes it was Keith's house in Greece. Sometimes it was life insurance policy. But it really just depended on what was happening at the time. There wasn't a strict schedule. It clearly was not the case that all of these payments were consistently made and monitored, and it was, something that was streamlined for many.
If there was nothing wrong with it, why did Paul go to the extra steps of making fake and false, fraudulent bank statements? If it was totally copacetic, if Keith was not pissed off, I mean, I know you're going to say that he flies off the handle all the time, but maybe because his brother's stealing from him.
Years and suddenly it's getting all messed up. That's not what happened. It was the same thing just happening consistently over the years. In 2018, in April, the loan was $72,000. So from 2007 to 2018, the loan grew by about $30,000, which means over the course of those years, the loan, sometimes it was paid, sometimes it grew. This wasn't unusual. But in December of 2018, again, Keith was just stressed because he didn't have the fallback of the disability money that Paul had. He relied on that business income. He relied on that money to fund his life.
So Keith unalived himself and set Paul up to get the insurance money. Okay. Why am I trying to make sense of this? There's no point.
And so he knew that if contract didn't renew for any reason, he was going to need access to money. And that's why he was concerned suddenly in November about the money. Again, April, same thing. Paul says, oops, I took money from the trust, I will pay it back. And he does. And from April to November, everything's fine.
Because Keith
gets
didn't
over
know he
it.
was still.
Paul and Keith are the same that they've always been. That didn't affect their relationship. And by the way, you heard testimony that in prior years, 2014, 2015, 2016, the same thing happened. The same thing happened. Paul borrowed money from the trust and paid it back. I think I have a slide here somewhere.
This judges all of us.
I think I have a slide here somewhere.
Think on it.
$35,000 taken. Paul paid back. Detective Fasten testified to this. In 2015, $27,000. $2,000. 2016, $17,700 was withdrawn, and $14,700 was repaid. Again, it is matter. It is not unusual with all of the
Not
businesses.
unusual to steal funds from anyone. Da-da-da-da-da-da. It's not unusual to pillage the trust fund. And if you feel like this has a motive for anyone, well, it isn't unusual that you huffed paint. Oh, finally, Rapper Shame shows up. Way to show up late, StreamYard, you suck. Oh, God. At this point, I'm actively hoping that the Martians from Mars Attacks invade right now.
Including and the personal accounts and the trust accounts that the brothers are
little bit.
prioritizing what they need the money for in the moment, and they take money and they transfer it and they use it and they borrow it and then it gets paid back. In fact, you heard testimony that Paul, this is either from Steve or Ron, that Paul loaned the company money. In 2016, and this is, they call it a loan to officers, because Keith and Paul, being the owners of the business, they're the officers, the two of them. They both lent the business money from their personal money, their personal funds. Now, Keith is the 90% owner, and he's lending the business as of 2016, $118,690. And Paul, being only the 10% owner, loans the company more than that. He takes his own personal money, his money, and he puts it into the business. $179,000 and $285. Now that money was a loan on the books as of 2016. It wasn't ever paid back. The business never paid them back. It was still an outstanding loan.
This
is one more aspect.
This is 1.25 speed. Apparently, Keith, that asshole, murdered himself, as you do, to set Paul up. And Paul was just the bestest brother, and he was always helping Keith out of scrapes. I mean, that rapscallion. Oh my God, this hurts.
As to how the brothers ran their business. Put money into it, they took money out of it. And the trust account was just another account that was part of that. Paul took money from the account, borrowed it, 2014, and paid it back. And then he did the same in 2015 and paid most of it back. And then did the same in 2016 and paid most of it back. And then did the same in April of 2018 and paid it back. What makes this time any different? Suddenly, now that it's happening again in November, suddenly now is the time that Paul's worried. He's now suddenly worried. Oh, Keith found out. And they're going to talk about the records. There's records.
Wait a minute, Visa. I would like to parlay with you. I would like to donate, or I would like to borrow a bunch of money, and then I will pay a portion of it back. And then you'll just cancel any debt left over, because I mean, I paid a little bit of it back. If she brings up the one-armed man, I might actually lose my if I start hysterically giggling, you guys, I've just reached the point where this has become so stupid. I have to turn to giggling.
Account records, and the state's gonna argue that Paul created those records to trick Keith and Steve Weinstein. Make this payment. He's gonna pay it back. They want to get mad. And he will
Look, okay, so he was stealing and he was lying, but Keith was gonna get mad, and I already kind of told you Keith was a bit of an asshole. I mean, haven't you been listening to me babble for 2 hours at 1.25 speed? I feel like the Matrix is glitching, but I also feel this is the reason that AI wouldn't keep us alive because no battery is worth the headache this bitch is. I'm just saying there are easier ways to get energy than hooking this chick up and trying to make a reality for her. I mean, it'd be easier. Oh my God, AI's dumbing us down so we'll be more docile and dumber batteries. We won't notice that the Matrix is glitching. Holy shit. Skynet, I would just like to remind you, I say thank you to my toaster.
overly upset. He's overly upset. Who's gonna deal with that? Who's gonna deal with that? And Keith finding out doesn't change the fact that this has happened before. Paul knows that Keith is under stress.
Paul was always kind of a fuck up. So really, what was one more fuck up? Honestly.
They're brothers and they work together. He knows that Keith is worried about the Doris Duke contract, and Paul is trying to tell him it's gonna be okay, it's gonna work out, it's gonna be fine. Him taking or borrowing money from the trust, and even trying to hide that from Keith temporarily, does not make him a vicious, monstrous murderer. Those are two totally different things.
He didn't steal money. Actually, look, they were constantly stealing money. Okay, well, he paid most of it back. I mean, this is a sped up Alex Jones was always right cycle. First, this isn't happening. The whatever side is lying to you, it's Russian propaganda. Well, look, if it's happening, it's very rare, and this is why it's a good thing. Okay, it's happening. And, here's why this is okay that it's happening, and you're just getting the wrong narrative. And fine, Alex Jones was right. I have never seen that cycle happen within the same person having an argument before. Godly.
And one has nothing to do with the other, and one is normal. It's normal for these guys.
It's normal to steal from your family. I mean, everyone in the Caneiro family kind of sucks dong. Look, they were all a bunch of schmucks. I mean, what the hell is this? You know what, ma'am? You had me on. It was normal for him to lie. I mean, look, he was protecting Keith by protecting Keith from the truth that he was stealing, but he knew that Keith was stressed. He was really more of a life coach. Oh my God.
Of course, Paul didn't want to upset Keith. Of course, he didn't want Keith to get upset again. The money could have been paid back at some point without Keith realizing. Even if he did, they're still brothers.
Okay, he wasn't stealing, but even if he was hiding stealing, he would have paid it back without Keith noticing because, businessmen who make deals for millions of dollars tend to, give no craps about their accounting and their books. You are doing a fantastic job, ma'am. Do you work for the state?
It's happened before, and maybe it would happen again. Doesn't make me murder. Now, Paul wasn't the only one who was aware that sometimes Keith would get a little worked up. Because in April, when Steve said that Keith was overly upset, in November, Steve says when he spoke to Keith, he tried to calm him down and told him to get some sleep and they would deal with it in the morning. So on November 19th of 2018, when Keith is telling Steve what's happening and what he's realizing, Paul took borrowed money from the trust again. He's not happy about it. He wants Steve.
No, I think the Freudian slip was the word you used at first. Took. Oh, he borrowed money. No, took. And yeah, I'm sorry, but most people have a right to be upset if someone who was in, again, the name of what Paul was a trustee, meaning that he broke trust. Good God.
Doesn't want a loan on that life insurance policy. Steve says, we'll deal with this tomorrow. Steve's not like, oh my God, this is shocking. This is a revelation. No, this is par for the course. Okay, Keith, relax.
Okay. Also, I hesitate to tell you, you're doing a wonderful job of convicting your, oh wait, you're in the defense. Anywho, maybe admitting that casually through other witnesses that Paul was constantly stealing money to the point that it had become habitual and routine and they had a system to talk Keith down. Maybe it's hurting his credibility as a good guy just a scotch.
Go to bed, calm down. We'll deal with it in the morning. We'll figure it out. You heard on the phone when Keith is trying to get Paul to give him the login. Paul is yelling at Keith, "Wake up, Paul! Wake up!" Because Keith wants to know what's happening now. You heard testimony that Paul was sleeping. He wasn't feeling well. And he also, just like Steve Weinstein, figured we'll deal with it in the morning.
He did deal with it in the morning.
At some point,
He left at 2 a.m. So Kim, he did deal with it in the morning. You actually made a point, although that was the point for the state. Just, I don't know. I don't know why you would wear skin tight plaid as a small person with a high waist and what I can only assume was a leftover 80s pleather jacket from Duran Duran. I don't know. It looks like she stole Freddie Mercury's jackets from Scandals, the album. But other than that, I can't really tell you what's going on there.
Keith did say to Paul, I'm going to give you a couple hours. And he was hoping that Paul would wake up at some point and give him answers that night. Because again, Keith's a little headstrong. He wants to know what's happening. This was the conversation that Steve Weinstein testified to. You told him to try to calm down and get some sleep, yes. And you told him basically we can handle this in the morning. We should look into this tomorrow. Now,
Tomorrow, it's still fraud. Tomorrow, theft is not time adjacent.
I think it's clear from the testimony that when it comes to the actual money derived from this life insurance policy, $3 million, the state did not follow that money. They were very focused on this $78,000 in trust situation and money being borrowed and paid back and taken. But they were not concerned so much with where did this $3 million end up. And this question was asked to a couple different witnesses in this case. Mr. Murray asked Detective Fasten. I asked Detective Petrozello. And you heard testimony from Mr. Cardenas, the expert, who talked about a Slayer statute. And he testified that under that statute, if someone is accused or convicted, rather, of murdering or being responsible for the death of the policyholder, they get cut off from it, right? And that makes sense because you're not going to reward a murderer with the life insurance money. You can't kill people to get the money. That's a reasonable law, and that's what that law is. And it's kind of obvious, it's common sense. We wouldn't let people murder people so that they can make money.
Can we get Kim Kardashian? At this point, Kanye West might make more cogent and less offensive arguments. Anyone know where he is? Any idea?
But what that means is because Paul and Corey are 50%, I guess, sort of like backup beneficiaries, right? Because originally it's the family. But they're all deceased. The money gets split between Corey and Paul.
I need to ask, can someone get Tucker Carlson? Does my face stay like this for too long? Do I get my own like really cool, really popular podcast? I just need to know because I like what is the big deal?
Unless Paul is convicted of murdering the family, then it all goes to Corey. Now, there was simply no investigation into this. There's no information. You didn't hear any testimony. All you heard was, no, we didn't follow that. Well, we know that Paul's here and Corey's not. Why not follow this money? Why not look into it? Why not investigate it? Why not rule out a hypothesis? We've had over 7 years to investigate this, and there was no information presented to you. Now, going a little bit more into the facts of the case itself.
Okay, now this is actually a point that I do think the defense actually had. Now it's only taken her the entire length of Deuteronomy to get to a damn point. But I don't think the state actually did a good job of explaining who these alleged two men at 4:30 were. That being said, while that was legitimate, the defense put on a case. They could have brought back that witness. They could have had their investigators look into these things. They could have called Corey themselves. They could have, elicited a sample from him. They didn't. They're acting like they didn't get a chance or a fulsome, opportunity to argue this.
There was also no investigation into the two men that were outside of Paul's house at 4:30 in the morning. We heard this testimony from Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington. Heather Kapp testified that at 4:30 a.m., she woke up to excited male voices outside. She looked at her clock and it was 4:30 a.m. She looked at her window. She saw two men running with some type of flashlights. She couldn't distinguish whether it was an actual flashlight or phone. She wasn't sure, but she saw light. They had dark colored clothing and black baseball hats. One man ran to the front door and was banging on the front door. She said she heard and saw the banging on the front door. And she never saw him go inside. She was watching him. That's the first man. The second man she sees goes around to Marilyn Klein's driveway, where you can see the fire from her driveway at the back of Paul's house. So you can see that.
Wait, when do we typically, so it's fall back. So let's just say in theory, she didn't set her clock. Yeah. I never thought that my brain would feel like it's run a marathon, but it does.
And she says this second man was kneeling down for, quote, a good amount of time and just watching the fire, pointing the flashlight in Paul's backyard. And she said at that point, there were no cars in Marilyn's driveway.
You would think if someone was waving a flashlight around in Paul's backyard, the video that we saw from the neighbor that Paul installed the security system on, let's see here, we have been going 2 hours, but we're on 1.25, so I don't know. Is it still February? Has it been Valentine's Day yet? Where are we? Are we still in the year 2026?
She said she saw an older model four-door sedan outside of her home. She said it was not a pickup truck. And she also testified that she later saw the Canerio Porsche SUV parked outside. Later saw. She knows what their car looks like. And she says she later saw it. It's not the same car. Their car was not parked in the street at 4:30 in the morning. She said the men went to different parts of the house and she lost track of them. She did not see them again that day. And there were many people around that day. A lot of responders, a lot of people out in the street working on the fire. Neighbors are out of their houses, never sees them again. She said she saw the fire escalating for about 20 to 30 minutes, and then she saw the first vehicle arrive. She said multiple times that
No, that's not right. See, again, the fire was noticed, and on the, again, security video that we saw, it was what is it? It was near 458. So we didn't see any flashlights kind of being wielded around, higgledy-piggledy. No, we saw a flash of flickering light that indicated that a fire was started. We didn't see that. We didn't see, indications of someone running around trying to find the best place to, start a fire. Oh God, if she and Spartacus got together, I know he's getting married to a woman, I believe. I think. I'm not too up on my Cory Booker lore.
she was 10 o'clock. Just to put it into context, that's the front of Mr. Canero's house. She says the first man runs up, bangs on that.
It's been 7 hours and 15 days since she started her closing statement. Oh, dang. Before Sinead O'Connor went insane.
Door. The second man is in that driveway where you see the red vehicle and the white vehicle, except there were no vehicles at that time. And they're crouched down in the driveway or kneeling for a good amount of time, pointing a flashlight in the direction of Paul's backyard. Who are these people? Jonathan Harrington says,
Who was Paul's backdoor lover? Who was trying to get in? I'm just saying, there were a lot of people that thought Paul was really, really awesome in like a weird, weird way. They were all male adjacent.
he's in bed, and he heard loud voices in the street. The voices, he heard them, he testified initially, he heard them between 4:30 and 5. He looked at his cable box clock. And he was a little concerned about marrying himself to a specific time. He was very clear about that. It was around, it was approximate, it could have been 4:45. He didn't want to say it was definitively 4:30. Understandable. It wasn't looking at timepiece. It wasn't looking at, it was a cable box clock. And sometimes it was confusing. He's back to a light sleep. Then he wakes up and sees lights. And he sees police car at around 5 a.m., which is consistent with when the officers arrived. All of this is happening. He's in bed, he hears the voices, he looks at his clock, goes back to sleep for a while, and he goes to sleep. Wakes back up at some point, testified, he got out of bed, came inside. And I was with Heather Cap that it was 4:30. Can you tell us exactly how that happened? I woke up to the voices, I turned, I looked at my clock, it was 4:30. Okay, so based upon being woken up, what exactly did you physically do? I woke up and I looked at my clock. And when you heard the voices, you got up and looked out your window, I checked my clock, and then I got up. Out of my
In Parallax, they were Cajun. They were Cajun blackened. And that was in poor taste, but y'all, in self-defense, look at this judge. I'm wearing I went to school for so long. How did you get through law school? What am I doing with my life? I could have been a streamer.
bed and I went to my window. So you check your clock first? Yes. And the clock said 4:30? Yes. So at 4:30, you check your clock and then you get up and you look out the window? Yes. We talked about how you gave a couple statements. She never wavered from the time of 4:30. She is sure. Unlike Mr. Harrington, who's more approximation oriented.
Unsure.
She's like, it was definitively 4:30. I know I looked at my clock and she said it numerous times. So just to be clear, 4:30 a.m., You wake up, you hear the voices, the two men, and then you look out your window and you see two men, and she says, after checking my clock. Jonathan Harrington, I asked him, just to be completely clear, when you first heard anything outside your window, I'm sorry, this was the prosecutor. When you first heard anything outside of your window that morning, did you tell the police what time approximately you thought it was? And he testified, I probably said it was between 4:30 and 5. But after I showed him his statements from 7 years ago that were taken the week this happened, he agreed. When I asked him, you told both the private investigator and the prosecutor's office the week that this happened, meaning when his memory was most fresh, that you heard these voices at around 4:30 in the morning. Yes. And the prosecutor.
Memories like a corner of something. Look, I didn't get into cats, y'all. It was freaky to me even before they tried to do it with CGI. And I'm a cat person, but the anthropomorphic cats were creepy as hell to me. I think it was the leotards. Oddly, furries don't scare me as much as people in leotards dressed as cats. I don't know what that says about my psyche, but furries less creepy than like the cast of Cats. But then the CGI cats from the movie Cats are more creepy than furries and the cats from the musical Cats. I hope that that's explained. It's not confusing. It's more that I just didn't get the point. And it was a lot of, why are we doing this? What is this? It didn't have a through line. Had I known that it was going to be a collection of vignettes, I would have been more understanding. I thought that there was a through line, and no. And I'm not going to sit for 45 minutes listening and watching people in cat suits. It's, as much as I love musicals, I just couldn't do it. Could not.
Office means he's talking and Officer Bones, remember, I showed him a transcript of a body-worn camera. That means it's a transcript of the conversation he
Mr.
had with the officer.
Bones, how do you feel, Mr. Bones? Mr. Bones feels rattling. Ha ha, that's a good one. Okay, yes, I love White Christmas. Look, as a side note, I would like to say that I am the best mother ever because God gave me the opportunity to have 3 girls, and I have never dressed them all up in taffeta and make them do the, sister song with a fan and everything, and dress my boys up then and do the sister song as well. So, I may not be the bestest mom ever, but I've never, ever made my kids do, oh crap.
On scene, right after this happened that day. And he tells Officer Bones he heard people talking about a half hour before all of the police got there. And we know what time the police got there. Chris Sorrentino, the fireman, who's around the corner, he gets there the soonest. He's minutes away. Katie calls 911 at 4:58. Chris Sorrentino testifies he's there by around 5:02. Officer Redmond and the remaining officers are dispatched at 5:02. Because it takes a few minutes, as we know, for the 911 call or the alarm company to relay the information to dispatch, and dispatch to relay it to the police. So they arrive minutes, Officer Redmond arrives minutes later. He arrives almost very close in time to Chris Sorrentino. Officer Marino gets there around 5:05, 5:06, and Officer Bernhard arrives a few minutes later after 5:02. These officers are not on scene anywhere near 4:30 a.m. It's clear that they are all on scene, including Chris Sorrentino, after 5 o'clock a.m. Now, I understand that it's possible that maybe they were mistaken, right? Maybe Heather Cap, I don't know, maybe her clock was off. Maybe she misread the clock. That's possible, right? But Jonathan Harrington too? They both coincidentally have clocks that are wrong. They both coincidentally see and hear or hear two male voices at 4:30 a.m. or approximately 4:30 a.m. and they're both wrong. Both of them who live right next to each other. What are the chances of that? If it was one of them, I would.
4 years. It's been 84 years.
Oh my God. They went to lunch. This heifer's still not done. You guys, I I I will be stopping to get an adult beverage or 27 or a whole damn case. Oh.
Would understand. The two of them, both neighbors, how do you explain that? How do you explain that two neighbors heard and or saw the exact same thing at 4:30 a.m., said they checked their clocks? What's happening on 27 Tilton Drive? Everyone's clock is a half hour behind? No. Their testimony and their observations are consistent. And here's the problem. The police never even considered a two-person theory because they were focused on Paul. But there are facts in this case that support that two people are responsible for these murders and these crimes. There's two men outside of Paul's house at 4:30. We just talked about that. I'm going to go through the rest. Here's a map of Paul's house, 27 Tilton Drive. And you can see from the map that there's two ways to exit and enter Tilton Drive.
Oh my God. We didn't even think of this. It makes sense. Paul was in Slytherin and he disapparated. You dirty, stinky motherfucker. We figured it out. We may be muggles, but we figured it out. Go get an Auror. Someone get Weasley. He's probably done being henpecked by Hermione. Someone get Ronald Weasley to take this man to Azkaban. Let's go.
There's an intersection at the top and there's an intersection at the bottom. So if you're at 27 Tilton, you can go toward the top and make a right or left onto Green Grove Road. You could also come down this way and make a right or left onto Green Grove Road. And the problem is that we only have surveillance video from that side of Tilton. It's hard to see on the map, but it's that top portion. And not a single officer or detective, including lead detective.
Ma'am, so would you say it's just the tip of the iceberg, if you will? But-ching.
Responsible for the entire case could tell you why we don't have video from the other side of Tilton.
I'm going to check that, Judge.
It's the juror's recollection that controls as to what, if any, testimony there was about attempting to obtain surveillance from the other side of Tilton.
Every detective or officer we heard from said, oh, yeah, they looked. Well, where is it? There's no documentation. I confirmed that with Detective Petrozello. I said, well, can you point me to a report where it explains? Is this another bizarre coincidence on 27 Tilton Drive that the only people on the one side have surveillance cameras?
Do not attempt to fix your monitor or cell phone. What you are seeing is not reality. You have stepped into the retard zone. These stories are to shame and name the stupid in society that have gotten promoted a lot, above their capability. This is the Twilight Zone. They walk among us. They don't know that they're stupid.
What are the chances that we have 3 or 4 houses on that side of the road? 3 houses, I think, at least, with surveillance cameras. And none on the other side, the entire other side.
Show us the Zapruder film again. Show it again. You can't handle the truth. There was no grassy knoll.
No one owns a surveillance system. There's no documentation. There's no reporting of, look at all those little boxes. Who lives there? Do they have cameras? Do they not have cameras? Were they working? Were they not working? Is it a ring? Is it not a ring? Is it motion activated? Is it not motion activated? How about motion activated lights? Because it's dark out. And even if you can't see, maybe you can. I don't know. We don't know because we don't have it. What if you could see motion activated lights going off at the time? I'm just pointing out evidence we don't have that I would submit would be relevant to determining whether and where those 2 people went. Where did they go?
I think we have actually breaking news. We have figured out where she went to school.
The Derek Zoolander Center for Kids Who Can't Read Good. What is this?
A center for ants!
How can we be expected to teach children to learn how to read if they can't even fit inside the building?
He makes a fair point, and I would like him to join the defense team because it would have to be 3 times bigger.
Derek, it's just a
I don't want to hear your excuses. The center has to be at least 3 times bigger than this.
He's absolutely right.
Professors at her school, probably.
The 2 intersections. I submit, ladies and gentlemen, it's not a coincidence. It's not a coincidence that Heather Kapp and Jonathan Harrington heard 2 men or saw 2 men at 4:30 in the morning in the area. And we don't know what happened to those men. These are the surveillance videos that we have. I'm sure the state will discuss them, so I don't need to go into too much detail at this point, but I'm just showing you a screenshot of what each surveillance video depicts.
Don't believe your lying eyes. The state's going to attempt to tell you that these visual graphic evidence, this, hocus pocus out of focus evidence in which you see a Porsche Macan. Well, how do you know that's not been interpolated? How do you not know if that's pinched to zoom? The state's going to claim that this is evidence. But, I mean, were you there?
We have some from 27 Tilton. We have a couple from the area of 15 Willowbrook. And that's all we have. And then we have that one in the bottom corner. That's that little house near, I don't know if it's a house or what, but it's near 15 Willowbrook. And that's when the Detective Petrozello, I believe, was testifying. There's a gate. It's a long road. You can't tell how far down that gate you can see. But this is a case where we have 4 people deceased. And we have 2 fires. And we have surveillance video from the area of Mr. Caneiro's home. Then we have surveillance video from the area of 15 Willowbrook. But we don't have anything in between. We don't know the route that, if it is the same car, let's assume it is, what route did it take? Where did it stop? Where did it go? Based on the video, they're saying the car took approximately 19 or 20 minutes, depending on whether you're going there or back. They Google mapped it. They drove it in the middle of the day. What about in the middle of the night when there's no one on the street? How quickly can you get from point A to point B? Can you make?
Are you making the case that Paul likely floored it and therefore he gave himself more time to set his own house on fire? Okay, I mean, it is an interesting strategy for the defense to try to use, but I'm willing to listen.
Stop? Can someone get in or out of the car? And we don't have any surveillance video that shows who's in the car. We don't know who's driving. We don't know who, if anyone, is in the passenger seat. We don't know if another car came from another direction. There's one screenshot missing from here because it wasn't introduced, but it was testified to. And I asked Detective Petrozello about the BP gas station. Because if you recall, when you're looking at the map of 15 Willowbrook, they're alleging that the car came from essentially the back roads coming from right to left onto 15 Willowbrook. But this way is Route 37, and the BP gas station is here. So I asked Detective Petrozello.
No, you asked a detective who has been working in this county for 20 years, and he said, I quote, "None of the cameras are going to catch that intersection because they aren't well set up for that. They are set up to provide security and protection for the shopping center. So it's kind of ridiculous that they would waste one of a finite amount of cameras to look at this residential entrance and exit." Now that they know that Paul lived there and possibly his family continues to live there, I would put a camera on all entrances and exits. But there you go.
Is the reason you got this surveillance video because you wanted to see if potentially the McCann, the vehicle that they suspect, right? Paul's owner vehicle is coming from this direction. Now, he conceded that there were cars driving past that gas station at that time. But he took no interest in that because it wasn't the McCann. It's just not a full, complete picture. It's not a full story. Why don't we have more surveillance video? It's Ocean Township to Colts Neck. It's 20 minutes, approximately, middle of the day, according to Google Maps. There's different routes. There's various houses, businesses, like in any residential area in Monmouth County. You would expect that if you wanted to follow that car from point A to point B, you would be able to do so. And you would be able to ascertain more information. Or get video from the other side, from the Route 37 side, BP gas station side, and see if any of those cars are leading to 15 Willowbrook. We just don't have that information.
Where was Deadpool?
We have surveillance video. We don't necessarily have answers. Another.
Ow, ow, quick, what does an aneurysm feel like? We have surveillance and we have evidence, but we don't have answers. Ma'am, I would like to challenge you to a combat game of Clue. Basically, it's Clue, but we both have a Nerf, firearm, if you will. And whoever wins gets to shoot the ever-living crap out of the other one. Now, these are Nerf, so they won't hurt too much, but I just have a feeling that I'd be lucky.
Aspect of a two-person theory is that there were two pairs of jeans in Paul's basement. You only heard about one. You heard about the jeans on the right. Those were the ones that the lab tested. They were originally bunched up with a bunch of things. The lab was able to separate them. The lab wasn't able to separate that second pair, and they never tested it. The detective Alona, I asked him, I said, what about the second pair? Because you heard that sometimes the lab doesn't test things, right? There's a word for it. We have to manage our caseload, and sometimes we can retest it if we're asked.
You could have
The lab
asked.
was never asked to test that second pair of jeans. And when I questioned Detective Catalona about it, he wasn't even really aware that it was a second pair of jeans. But you can look at them, and you can tell that these are not the same pairs of jeans. They're two different colors.
Look at this stuff. Isn't it neat? Wouldn't you think this collection's complete? What is it? Or look at it. What's the word? Evidence. There was no way they were going to get anything off of a very charred piece of evidence. Now, why you didn't bring this up during any other part of testimony, I don't know.
To start, you can see the pocket area, and the actual items are in evidence. You can look at them for yourselves. You can examine them. There are two different pairs of jeans. And by the way, we do know the pants we have. The size is a 34 width, 32 length. At the time that Paul was arrested, the testimony was that he was 5'11" and 230 pounds. That's what was listed on his arrest report. And when Mr. Murray questioned, I think it was Detective Zarilla about it, he was like, well, I didn't actually measure or weigh him. That's what was reported. Okay, isn't it relevant? I mean, it wasn't in question.
We are all getting hotboxed with stupid. I might actually want to watch Dude, Where's My Car? Jim, don't you understand all of the story that the state's trying to sell you on is a complete and total lie. Oh my God, what is wrong with... I'm just skipping ahead a little bit. So it's on lunch. Well, oh God. All right. Think we were here.
One was turned off by the first responders, but one wasn't. Okay. 16 minutes for that. And then you have the electrical meter. Something is twisted off the panel, and then it's disconnected. I don't know how long that.
No, wait, we're going back because this is her explaining away her client being caught on camera and all of this. Oh my God, what is wrong? Oh God.
Along the way, he said he did an external hard. I guess it would be a router firewall that I had Square One manage just so I didn't have to worry about anything happening to my system. Unfortunately, I didn't understand how it worked. He did. So I would always have him take care of any problems that occurred, and one of them was trying to get the video cameras to work. Was there something, an acronym that he used? He set up a DDNS, and I know it has something to do with changing IP addresses, but I don't understand it. He did. Okay, so you mentioned you don't understand it. Is this something that's simple or more complex? To me, it was complex. And did Paul ever set up any access points in your house anywhere? He set up an access point over our garage, but it was too far away from the antennas for our router, and this way my wife had her office there, and it allowed us to have better internet access at the end of the house. Now, this doesn't explain everything, but it does demonstrate that this is complicated. It's not as simple as, oh, well, this has wires and Wi-Fi doesn't, so therefore it's no impact. Where's the expert testimony to say that? I mean, it's simply, you can tell that it's complicated. And Detective Brady testified that when he spoke to Paul and Paul was trying to explain it to him, he didn't really understand it either. And I think I asked him, like, sounds pretty technical. And Detective Brady said, yeah, it was. Now, Detective Brady is a detective and he does not have body-worn camera attached to him. But there's many other officers on scene that did. And if Detective Brady, with all of his years of law enforcement training and experience, had said, hey, buddy, come over here, I want to record, just stand here while I have this conversation with Mr. Caneiro while he explains the issues he's having with his Wi-Fi, record it. Maybe we would have a memorialization of that explanation. We don't have that. But the fact that a system is hardwired doesn't mean, in and of itself, that it's not affected by the Wi-Fi or that it doesn't affect the Wi-Fi. And similarly, the fact that the screen cuts out doesn't mean that cameras were shut off.
Bitch, you are funny. Oh my God. Is this your comedy bit? Oh my God. What if this has been a comic roast of him? She's using irony. Uh, I, uh, I don't know. She's trying to break down our will to live, and we're all really lucky that we don't live in Canada, because at this point,
there's many potential explanations there. As far as a power strip, an outlet, a wire, an access point, we don't know. We also know, though, that on the 19th, Paul did send an email seeking assistance. He's discussing access points. He's discussing an issue with his firewall. And evidence. This is consistent with what he is telling the police. This is consistent with what he explained, or what Katie explained to you about issues with the Wi-Fi. Now, I want to talk about the timeline of 15 Willowbrook. This is the timeline. I know we kind of wrote it down. There's an exhibit. But
oh God, no. Oh
At
no.
2:07, there's a vehicle leaving 27 Tilton, which is the loaner mechanic. At 2:27, there's a vehicle that arrives at 15 Willowbrook. At 2:35 a.m., that's when the garage lights turn on and we saw the figure outside of the frosted window. The next video at 2:51 ends and all cameras stop. I want to focus you on that timeline right there for a second at 16 minutes. Because from 2:35 to 2:51, that's when you see the garage lights and the person kind of going back and forth, and the state's going to argue. There's the electric meter on one side, there's the generator on the other side, and what the person is doing is they're disconnecting one and then flipping the switch to the other. And what they're arguing in the same breath is that Mr. Caneiro knows how to do these things, that he knows how to use the generator, that he knows what switch to turn off, that he knows
that he has midget porn. I mean, what? You know, he had some of the weirdest tentacle, like senpai weirdness. Like there are levels of weird that he had in his, dirty folders.
how to access the electrical meter, which are, by the way, both on the outside of the house. Anyone can see them.
I mean, how are we to know if it's not some other random guy in a Porsche Macan who saw his power boxes and totally decided to undo them because they're outside. Anyone could see them. I mean, it's very odd to make she was wearing a short skirt argument that having your electricity sources outside is a temptation is provocative, but it's an interesting theory.
say Mr. Caneiro has specialized knowledge and experience with Keith's home. Has intimate familiarity with it. He's the one that would be able to turn off the generator and disconnect the electrical meter. Okay. Then why does it take 60 minutes? Why does it take 16 minutes to
God, what the hell is this? Look, Youngest Most Feral has made more intelligent arguments explaining how a robbler, broke into our house not to steal anything, only to write his name in Sharpie and then leave the house to get him in trouble. Like, it took, how long does it take to, unelectricify things? Like, hours? 2 years? I don't know. Because Google isn't a thing, because you can't learn various information that you do not have access to based on the fact that we have, these walking smart computers in our hands. No, it's impossible. How could Paul do that? Now, this would be an actual cogent defense for me because, let's be real, it's more likely that I was attempting to fix the electricity and took out the entire power grid. That would be what you would be defending me on. I I didn't think that my client is not stupid, but he's not a rocket scientist. It is an interesting tightrope to walk.
disconnect an electrical meter and flip a switch on a generator that he had knowledge of? 16 minutes? Someone who's familiar with the generator and knows exactly which switch to flip takes.
She thought that this was a really smart point. That, last night it came to her like an epiphany, which for her means a dimmer switch went slightly higher. But, she's like, oh my God, this is just like when Elle Woods talked about the glycochromate thing from the perm. Oh my God, I totally can win this.
2 seconds. We're flipping a switch. We're pressing a button. You heard the testimony. There's like 3 different switches on the generator. One was turned off by the first responders, but one wasn't. Okay. 16 minutes for that. And then you have the electrical meter. Something is twisted off the panel, and then it's disconnected. I don't know how long that takes, but I submit that someone who knows it is familiar, intimately familiar, like they might argue, wouldn't take them 16 minutes to do that. But perhaps someone who is less familiar, it would.
Oh God, yes.
2:52 is when the power goes out. There's a loss of power on the Verizon ONT. Between 3:14 and 3:18, Keith's phone texts Paul's phone. At 3:18, Rob Block is alerted that the servers are down. 3:26, between 3:26 and 3:31, Dennis Kapoor hears gunshots and calls 911. Now, it's unclear, obviously. We don't know exactly what time he called. He couldn't even tell you. He said something in the 20s, but earlier originally he said 3:26, 3:27. But the CAD report says 3:31, 3:33. Either way, why are we fighting over minutes? Why is it such a big deal? Because, and why won't the officers concede the time? Because they know how important these minutes are. Why? Because it is a very tight timeline for one person to accomplish all of this. Because Keith is still alive at 3:18 when he's texting. And at 3:26 to 3:31 is when the gunshots are heard. Presumably, that is when Keith is shot. So that leaves, if it's 3:31,
He thinks she's doing a great job.
the time that the vehicle leaves, a very short amount of time. If it's 3:26, it's an extra 5 minutes. Still a very, very short amount of time. Because if Keith was shot first, and then the rest of the family is murdered, That's the time frame. I want to zero in on the 3.
Judge, stop this madness. Judge, listen to me. Look at me. Don't look away from me, Judge.
To the 348. Because at
No.
342 is when the Verizon Fios
We are going to actually...
What does that mean?
We are going to stop here because looking ahead, this heifer is going to go on for longer. She is going through videos. Good Lord. I need to stop by the post office and look, I'm gonna be real, the booze store. So we can finish this because honestly, I just need to rest my head a little bit. Good night. I have never been more irritated. So I do need to get a stream set up. So let me do that because I honestly thought that we would be on, Verdict Watch. So I wanted to set up for the other stream, the Faust stream, but I guess that is not going to be happening today. So let me set up another stream because no, I do have another stream set up. Never mind. I'm a genius. Or no, I'm not. No, today's 18. I'm not a genius. Don't listen to me. I'm glad. I'm glad that I'm like, don't trust me. I don't know what I'm doing. Yeah, so we might have to wait for the state to rectify this absolute horseshit. For another day. I don't know what is going on. I don't know why the judge didn't give her or them a time limit. I do understand that this has been a big case, but we didn't get this in the Karen Reed case, which was again just about as long. So it really is kind of awe-inspiring that he has given them this much latitude to, well, belabor the point. Now, maybe they made the argument that they needed more time because it was such a long case, but it really... It doesn't make sense to me. This is way too much for the jury to you should stick with your 5 or 10 really most important points. If there are 5 really important points and 2 sub-points under each of those, then you want to do that. You don't want to overload people with information. Now, it does seem to be a ploy also to make sure that the jury is so discombobulated by the time the state comes in to speak truth to them, they are overwhelmed and just done. But I don't think she realizes that that is more of an impetus to give the quickest jury FU verdict back. I don't know what we're doing here. It does seem like you would think the judge at some point would say that's the point. Interesting, and thank you in Parallax for that information. I love the collective wisdom of chat. I always really enjoy that. So I am going to be setting up for the next stream, and that'll start at 3:30 after I've gotten the feral wild boy children. It will be a tipsy stream because let's be real, no one should watch the rest of this sober unless you drinking is not your jam. Then obviously you do not have to deal with adult beverages, though I would recommend you get an emotional support snack of your choosing, because y'all, apparently we have got hours of this left. So until we meet again, blessed be the interface when we meet again and we still have to listen to this heifer. Take a break, watch some puppy videos, do a math equation or something, make yourself feel smart, play tic-tac-toe or some, solitaire, some Sudoku. Make sure that you're still, watch a smart video like about space or something. Do a detox of stupid. I would not recommend, I would not recommend watching ahead. I don't know that you'll be able to watch this twice. But you guys, just take some preventative aspirin. Definitely. I will see you guys at 3:30. Bye, you guys.